We often talk and speculate about what astronauts have seen, but never what they've said. This video here is the creepiest things NASA astronauts have said. Let's go.
Did you know that some of the biggest alien enthusiasts were astronauts themselves? Countless space travelers have experienced terrifying things that make our blood run cold. Because let's be honest, how would you react if you saw a bizarre creature out there that made you question your own sanity?
And I feel like more astronauts would step up and say something, but I feel like they've all probably signed like an NDA or something where they can't. And they've probably seen enough or know enough to not cross certain people or certain lines. So that's why I feel like we haven't gotten the information from them that we want.
If your heart is beating up to your neck and it was knocking on your spacecraft from outside, how would you tell the public about your experience later? And more importantly, would others even believe you? Do you realize that the foundations of manned space travel were laid by animals? Long before the dog Laika was launched into orbit, a swarm of fruit flies scratched the edge of space in February 1947. Other involuntary space pioneers included monkeys, cats, mice, turtles, and microbes. And lo and behold, the U.S. astronaut Story Musgrave also claims to have spotted an animal on his trips into space. But it was very different from all the creatures we know from Earth. While Musgrave was in the service of NASA from 1967 to 1997, he was the only astronaut to set off into space on all 5 space shuttles. The encounter with the creature, or should we say bizarre something, which Musgrave later recounted, he described as follows. On 2 missions, and I still can't explain it, I saw a snake out there. It was between 1.8 and 2.5 meters long and kind of rubbery because it had inner waves. The snake followed me for quite a long time. The more you flew in space, the more incredible things you see out there. And that gives you the certainty that there are other creatures out there. Some are rather primitive, very simple single-celled organisms, but others are advanced civilizations that have existed for millions of years.
Think about it. If we think there's life on other planets, right? And I always think from maybe like something similar to maybe a human standpoint or maybe an alien standpoint, you got to think just like we have animals, they possibly have a form of that there. So it's no telling what they got that's similar to us, bro. Woo.
They do things that we can't even imagine. In an interview with Forbes magazine, the former space traveler reaffirmed his personal convictions. Asked what he thinks about the topic of extraterrestrial life, his answer was, "There are millions, if not billions of them out there. We think that we are the center of the universe, that everything revolves around the Earth. But according to statistics, there are billions of planets on which biological life exists. If they've taken care of themselves, they had millions of years to evolve and produce technology that enables interstellar travel." At this point, the reporter wanted to know exactly, have aliens ever visited Earth? Musgrave replied, "I keep an eye out for them and I pray they come, but there just isn't enough evidence. But why would they come to Earth after all? There are more promising destinations. If you look at the number of wars, the history of humanity and its relationship with itself, there's nothing for them to learn from us here." What Armstrong really said, everyone has their own beliefs, and while some don't know much about religion, others are convinced that nothing in the universe happens by chance, but is guided by a higher power. Maurice Chatelain is also of the opinion that mankind is by no means the result of a whim of nature. After his time at NASA, Chatelain published the book Our Cosmic Ancestors, in which he claimed that the cultures of antiquity were regularly visited by extraterrestrials and significantly influenced by them. The evidence of his controversial thesis would lie dormant in the visual and mathematical symbols that the galactic visitors left behind in the pyramids, Stonehenge, and the like. However, this is by no means the only controversial claim with which Chatelain has hit the headlines. In Our Cosmic Ancestors, it is also stated that Neil Armstrong experienced something on the moon that was so shocking that it has been kept from the public ever since. While the groundbreaking event was being watched by more than 500 million television viewers, the radio link to Earth was lost for around 2 minutes. Officially, this was for technical reasons, but unofficially, some NASA employees claimed to have heard the incredible words that cut the silence. Allegedly, the terrified Armstrong whispered at that moment, "These babies are huge, sir, gigantic. Oh God, you wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you, there are other spaceships out here lined up on the other side of the crater. They're on the moon and they're watching us." Who or what knocked on the spaceship? Yang Liwei has immortalized himself in the history books of his home country for all time. On October 15th, Yang Liwei set off into space aboard Shenzhou 5 spaceship, becoming the first Chinese space traveler ever. And yet the celebrated national hero experienced something on his mission that has the potential to haunt our nightmares. After all, in the eerie silence of space, sound is supposed to be an impossibility because, as we all know, sound needs a medium in order to propagate. But despite all the laws of nature, Yang Liwei later reported hearing an eerie knocking inside the spaceship. In detail, it sounded as if someone was hitting a piece of iron with a mallet. Both startled and confused, the astronaut immediately tried to get to the bottom of the source of the noise. But there was...
That's when you look around, you just act like you don't hear it. I'm not answering that. Are you kidding me? You think I'm answering? No, bro. It ain't opportunity, so I'm not answering.
There's nothing there. The view outside showed only a gigantic expanse of the cosmos. As a result, we still don't know who or what was banging on the spaceship at the time. As if this incident wasn't disturbing enough, other Chinese astronauts also claimed to have heard similar noises. Did this astronaut see a UFO? Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, yes, and who else? In view of the highly publicized Apollo 11 mission, we quickly forgot that 10 other people had visited Earth's constant companion. The fourth man to set foot on the dusty surface of the moon was NASA astronaut Alan Bean. And it was thanks to the space traveler's presence of mind that his mission could be completed as planned. The Apollo 12 rocket was actually struck by lightning during takeoff, causing all telemetry data to be lost. The young flight control employee then transmitted an unusual command that only Bean understood. As a result, he quickly switched the data processing system to emergency mode and restored the telemetry transmission. However, this was by no means the only incident that left a lasting impression on Alan Bean's memory. Once on the moon, the astronaut saw a mysterious glowing object in the distance that he simply could not place. Its appearance was somehow reminiscent of shiny shoe leather, which dramatically reduced the scope for conventional explanations. Alan Bean died on May 26, 2018, at the age of 86, and his mysterious observation remains an unsolved puzzle. Nobody will believe us. Did you hear that whistling too? Yes, it sounds like, well, space music. Isn't that strange? Yes, I hear it too. I was about to go see if there was anyone out there. Boy, is that strange music. We have to find out what it is. Nobody's going to believe us. What you just heard was an excerpt from the conversation astronauts Eugene Cernan, Thomas Stafford, and John Young had in May 1969. In order to set the course for the first manned moon landing, the trio dedicated themselves to the task of rehearsing the planned maneuvers under real conditions as part of the Apollo 10 mission. However, the question of what the men really heard in the lunar realm at the time is still the subject of heated debate today. And this despite the fact that the mystery has long been solved. According to NASA, the eerie moon music was simply due to interference between the radio equipment of the command module and the lunar module. However, there are people who are not so easily satisfied with this official version. There is one fact in particular that puzzles the skeptics. If the incident was really as ordinary as described, why were the recordings kept secret for decades? We never found out what it was. James McDivot's career got off to a curious start. Although he had never seen the inside of an airplane before, He applied to join the Air Force as a pilot in 1951. 14 years later, he finally found himself in command aboard Gemini 4, a mission that saw the first spacewalk by an American. And although Ed White spent 20 minutes outside the space capsule at the time, this is not the most memorable memory James McDivot took back to Earth, because he saw a UFO during the mission. The NASA astronaut later summarized the event as follows. During the Gemini 4 mission in 1965, I saw an object very close to our spacecraft that I could not identify. To me, it looked most like the stage of another rocket. I tried to photograph it, but unfortunately, the photos didn't turn out. We were never able to find out what it was. However, the ground radar data showed that there shouldn't have been any other object there. The man saw bizarre lights on the ISS. Leroy Chia, an American astronaut and former commander of the International Space Station, reported a shocking incident that allegedly took place during his service in 2005. Chia and his crew claimed to have seen a bizarre constellation of luminous objects that formed an inverted V together. Since then, he has been convinced that his crew was visited by extraterrestrial beings, even if there is still no definitive proof of this. The aliens are coming to Earth. Isn't it amazing that such sentences are said particularly frequently by people who have set off into space themselves? Many astronauts are firmly convinced that we are not alone in the universe, not least because of the frightening observations they made during their missions.
That's what I'm going to start doing. I'm going to start directing people that are skeptics and very skeptical about aliens to some of the astronauts. I'm going to try to comprise a list of astronauts who said or spoke about what they've seen extraterrestrial wise while being in space or whatever, what they've seen, what they've heard, what they've come across. And maybe that'll make them feel a little bit better. Or some people just going to be skeptics no matter what. But some will be like, you know what? Coming from this credible source, maybe.
Buzz Aldrin also saw something on his journey to the moon that he simply could not explain. But that's not all. The second man on the moon thinks it is impossible that we are the only living beings in the cosmos. July 20, 1969 is forever immortalized in our history books. As we all know, this was the day on which mankind reached a groundbreaking milestone. From then on, it was a species that traveled to foreign celestial bodies. 20 minutes after Neil Armstrong had taken his legendary "one small step for man," it was also time for Buzz Aldrin to leave the lunar module. Armstrong and Aldrin spent a total of 2 hours and 31 minutes on the lunar surface. And after the two space pioneers had set up a range of research equipment and the U.S. flag, they set about preparing the return flight to Earth with a good 20 kilograms of moon rock in their luggage. The lunar module took off without a hitch, and just under 4 hours later, the vehicle docked with the command module again. Reunited with the third Apollo 11 astronaut, Michael Collins, the trio then headed back towards our blue home planet. That's right, and then those behind the scenes at Area 51 switched off the cameras and had a great time fooling the whole world. Now, you've probably also heard that the moon landing is not regarded in certain circles as the most groundbreaking breakthrough in manned space travel, but as one of the greatest deceptive maneuvers of all time.
I'll be so happy when that is debunked and people realize that it actually took place, because I'm on the side that it actually took place. I just find it hard to believe that all of the people that participated in that actual event could keep a secret that long, and it's not them. They haven't come out and shown proof that it actually didn't take place. It's too many people involved.
According to this, the Americans wanted to achieve a technological victory over the hated Soviet Union at all costs, and incidentally, to divert attention from the unspeakable suffering of the Vietnam War. To achieve those goals, the USA was prepared to use any means necessary, so they staged the moon landing without further ado. Buzz Aldrin was also repeatedly confronted with such conspiracy theories over the course of his life, and he had his very own, powerful response to the accusations. When he was insulted as a liar and a fraud, by filmmaker Bart Sibrel in 2002 and urged to swear on the Bible. However, this was not the only unusual story with which Aldrin has etched himself into the memory of the online community. After landing on the moon, the astronaut said something that left many users with a captivating question. Did Buzz Aldrin see a UFO? The lunar visitor was quoted as follows: "There was something out there. We were close enough to observe it. It looked kind of L-shaped. It was a light that seemed to be moving parallel to us." Michael Collins also managed to observe the mysterious object through the telescope. And while Aldrin first shared this puzzling observation with the public in 2005, he confirmed his statements again a few months ago. But it seems that the Apollo 11 crew knew full well at the time that their sighting had the potential to make huge waves. For this reason, the men decided to be extremely reticent about the incident. Aldrin commented, "Of course, the three of us didn't want to blurt it out and say, 'Hey Houston, there's something next to us and we don't know what it is. Can you tell us what it is?' We didn't want to do that because we knew that the radio transmissions were being listened to by all kinds of people. And who knows, someone might have asked us to turn back because it was aliens." Instead, the astronauts preferred to approach the incident a little more cautiously. We decided to ask Houston carefully how far away the SIVB was. To explain briefly, this refers to the third stage of the Saturn V rocket. However, the answer from Earth did not really help to shed any more light on the galactic darkness. Later, Dr. David Baker, who was also involved in the Apollo 11 mission at the time, confirmed Aldrin's statements, which conversely means nothing other than that NASA knew about the appearance of the unknown flying object. In 2007,
that doesn't surprise us, bro. I just think they haven't said anything. They just refuse to say anything, and it's probably because their hands are being tied. But still, if you for 1 second don't think NASA knows something, you're out your mind. Straight up out your mind.
Baker commented on the incident as follows: "Obviously, it was an unidentified flying object, but such were by no means uncommon, and the history of manned spaceflight suggests that several crews have seen such objects." But did the objects necessarily have to be extraterrestrial spaceships? Well, although Aldrin described the observation purely technically as unidentified, he admits that the sighting could theoretically be explained in another way. There are explanations that don't amount to a spacecraft from other nations or other worlds. It's either a rocket that we had separated from, or one of the 4 shutters that fell off at the moment we pulled the lander out of the last stage, reflecting the sunlight. Despite this, Aldrin finds it hard to imagine that Earth is the only celestial body in the universe that harbored life. The former astronaut said, "There could be aliens in our Milky Way, and there are billions of other galaxies besides it. It is therefore almost certain that there is other life somewhere in the universe."
I couldn't agree more. Billions of other galaxies, but you think y'all have the nerve to say that we are the only species left? Mankind is the only. Man, we are not.
Neil Armstrong is said to have seen something incredible. Particularly curious, Aldrin's stories about the mysterious L-shaped object caused a stir afterwards that some people accused him of lying. In order to verify the truth of the story, a team from the Institute of Bioacoustic Biology set itself the task of analyzing the space traveler's voice under, quote, laboratory conditions. And according to the experts, there is no doubt that Aldrin was completely convinced by his report. And a second legendary visitor to the moon is also said to have seen something during the Apollo 11 mission that sends a shiver down our spines. Well, this is certainly true if we believe the words of Italian politician and journalist Sergio Zavoli. He claimed to have interviewed Neil Armstrong, but the article in question was only published 2 years after Armstrong's death. As a result, he was no longer able to comment on the explosive content, which reads as follows: "The astronaut told me that he saw a group of mysterious objects nearby during the final stages of the approach to the moon. When Armstrong was asked about the interference with radio transmissions by Mission Control Center at 4:05 on July 21, 1969, he replied, 'I see huge objects. They look like spaceships, and what's worse, they are watching us. While we are certainly well advised to treat the Italian statements with a certain amount of skepticism, as mentioned, Armstrong is no longer able to describe his view of things, and during his lifetime, the astronaut never commented publicly on UFOs or aliens. However, things are a little different in the case of another space traveler. And believe me, what Ed Mitchell had to say on this subject is even more outrageous than anything you've heard so far. The aliens visited Earth, and they saved us. As a participant in the Apollo 14 mission, Ed Mitchell became the sixth man on the moon on February 5, 1971. And yet it is not the astronaut's successful descent to the moon that has stuck in the public consciousness, but the incredible claims he made after his time at NASA. For example, he once said at an appearance at the National Press Club, "There is evidence that we are not alone in the universe, and no doubt that we have already been visited. We should prepare ourselves to look beyond our Earth and solar system and investigate what's going on out there."
Yep.
But how could Mitchell be so sure? Well, he was referring to the most famous UFO crash landing of all time, the mysterious Roswell incident of 1947. For what was officially just a crashed weather balloon was in fact an extraterrestrial spaceship that crashed on the Earth's surface along with its crew. According to Mitchell, the U.S. government wanted to conceal the true background of the incident at all costs. The eyewitnesses were massively threatened and prevented from speaking. However, as Mitchell himself was from the area and had already been to the moon, he was later able to gain the trust of local residents and learn the truth. He also managed to make himself heard in the Pentagon and to initiate an investigation into the alleged UFO crash. As part of this, a high-ranking admiral even confirmed all the rumors about aliens and flying saucers. But then, a higher authority intervened and the investigation was stopped. But Mitchell was not deterred by this setback and continued to do everything he could to present the truth, or at least his version of it, to the public. According to this version, the extraterrestrials had by no means merely visited Earth and observed it from the shadows. They had even actively intervened in the course of human history. In fact, it was thanks to the courageous intervention of the aliens that the Cold War did not escalate into a devastating nuclear war between the USA and the Soviet Union. NASA's response to Mitchell's claims, however, was as brief as it was clear. NASA has not cited any UFOs. Furthermore, NASA is not involved in any cover-up of extraterrestrial life on Earth or in space, period. And yet, the aforementioned team of experts who checked the veracity...
They can make that statement. They can 1000% make that statement and then turn around one day and say, well, we didn't know they were UFOs. We saw things, but we didn't know they were UFOs, so we couldn't say. They can spin that so many different ways.
Of Buzz Aldrin's voice came to the conclusion that Ed Mitchell was not lying either. For some, this is a crystal clear indication that things are going on in secret that the rest of the world should never know about. Others, on the other hand, remember that lie detector tests are no longer admissible in court, even in America.